Veni, Vidi, Vinci.
How can WWE mess up Giovanni Vinci this badly, for goodness sake? The Italian wrestler seemed destined for a bright future in the summer of 2024, but in just a few weeks, it looks like he has been completely sabotaged. This frustrates me, and I will tell you why.
La cosa migliore del passato è che è dietro di te.
Make yourself comfortable, grab a strong coffee. We're going to discuss all of this.
You are on the Wrestling Paradise.
And we're going to have a big rant about Giovanni Vinci. Let's go. But who is this famous Giovanni Vinci then? Don't worry, we will explain all of that. A former member of the Imperium team. Imperium, after all, is a notable team, a significant faction in recent years in WWE. We notably find Gunther, who in 2024 becomes the heavyweight champion. This shows how seriously this faction and its members are generally taken by WWE. By the way, I want to say that I was a fan, actually, especially their very black and white graphic charter and their culture of truly sanctifying the ring, considering it something sacred, something important. And I truly appreciate this attitude, these values, this mentality, and Giovanni Vinci was part of that. So, who exactly is Giovanni Vinci? Italian wrestler? For real. Really a true Italian. Born in 1990. So, a wrestler who is still quite young. In any case, in 2024, we can consider that he was part of this new generation of wrestlers, the next wave, let's say, of WWE superstars. And yet, what happened, hold on tight, in the summer, specifically in August, we started to see vignettes on SmackDown that introduced him in preparation for his debut. So it should be noted that when a character is about to debut, personally, I am always very happy when there are vignettes. For me, it's important to properly present a wrestler before they arrive so that we know who they are. They did not fall into WWE's usual trap of debuting someone from NXT under the assumption that we are already supposed to know them, when in fact we do not. If you weren't watching NXT, in this case you wouldn't know. Basically, Giovanni Vinci. At least you would only know him through Imperium. So it's very good to present him, to introduce him to the audience. It's important. And especially, we will get to those vignettes. It was very promising. We saw him in a suit, well dressed, wearing sunglasses, the V-belt like Vinci, I want to say. Since we saw hotels, notably the beautiful Armani Hotel in Milan, there was a bit of a feeling of luxury, of class. Then this very Italian side, but really, totally valorizing and positive. He also had his motto, which I find brilliant. It's quite obvious, but even though it's simple, I think it's very effective.
Veni, Vidi, Vinci.
Which could be translated as I came, I saw, I conquered. I find that it's ideal for a wrestler to have such a motto, especially since it aligns with his name, and it has this little play on words. V also stands for Victoria, victory, and above all, he claimed in his vignettes to be someone who wins, you know. In the end, he presented himself as a winner, someone who wants to come and conquer SmackDown now. It was very promising. And above all, I must say that while this kind of gimmick, well, if we can call it a gimmick, this identity, rather, could be a bit of a trap. Someone who wants to be very luxurious, in exuberance, in any case exuberance in a very classy way. It can sometimes seem ridiculous if the wrestler doesn't have the build for it, or if he doesn't have the charisma for it, but there's no problem at all in that regard for Giovanni Vinci, I think. When you watch his vignettes, you see someone who is at ease, who also seems to be eloquent, at least when he speaks on the microphone, and he was speaking in Italian in his vignettes as well. A rather deep voice, quite composed, credible, serious. When I see all this, I think it's promising. It's promising. You have someone who can really look like a star. When he is in a suit, sunglasses, classy. I tell myself, there we have something, but what happened afterwards? And that's it, my rant. And really, I am very angry about this because I don't understand how they managed to, and especially why they did what they did. So, hold on tight. So, after having had vignettes, he makes his debut, and he debuts in a match against Apollo Crews. Who is, after all, Apollo Crews? It should be noted that he is a wrestler who had, indeed, his moment of glory, so to speak, in WWE around 2021, where he even managed to become Intercontinental Champion. But overall, since that time, he has been languishing in the mid-card like Apollo Crews. Nothing against him, but that's the reality. There is clearly no plan for Apollo Crews. He has somewhat become a jobber, basically the kind of wrestler who puts someone else over. And everything seemed set for Apollo Crews to put over Giovanni Vinci, perhaps in just a few minutes, to make him look strong. And the whole idea, normally, when a new wrestler debuts, is obviously that he wins, that he starts to build and accumulate momentum, as they say. Basically, a series of victories, invincibility, increasing credibility, and more important names on his record, eventually leading to a potential match against the United States champion. In this case, by the end of summer 2024, it could have been LA Knight. By the way, I think it would have been great to see LA Knight against Giovanni Vinci, USA versus Italy. Honestly, that would have looked great. And it also fits with that slightly American vibe. The United States title, or maybe the Intercontinental title, would have been a bit better. But I think that kind of belt suits a European wrestler, in any case. But none of that first match, when the whole point is to build him up, he loses in a few seconds to Apollo Crews with a roll-up. Why? What were they thinking? This might be one of the most humiliating ways to lose. Afterwards, he can act as if he wasn't ready, which somewhat reminds one of Santino Marella. Moreover, I want to say, there haven't really been many Italians in WWE throughout history, especially since Santino Marella isn't even a real one, but Giovanni Vinci is a real one. And I want to say, it's really great, especially considering the strong Italian identity. After all, Italy is a country, it has an identity, that's undeniable. After Santino Marella, years later, having a credible, serious Italian who could eventually be featured in the main event, I think a well-booked Giovanni Vinci could go far. It could work, especially with a series of invincibility for a few months. For example, why not first go for the interim title and then face Cody Rhodes, who knows, at SmackDown? Frankly, he had the potential for it. Except that he loses to Apollo in a matter of seconds via a roll-up. What is clearly happening when we do this kind of booking, from my perspective in WWE, is that we are rushing this match, we don't care, and we are still trying to preserve him a bit, so we don't have him lose in a completely clean and legitimate way. We have him lose via roll-up. But, well, a few weeks later, he will lose again to Apollo Crews. So, the art of debuting in the main roster, at least solo, with a new gimmick, a new identity, a new character, and to lose right away, and within a few weeks to have lost all credibility and hype around him when everything was in place to truly have one of the next stars of WWE. So, there you go. 2 inexplicable losses. In a really random way, without even appearing on all the shows, which is really a sign that it's as if WWE said, well, we have to make this character debut, but we don't care at all, so we're going to make sure he's really not pushed, since he was never pushed, but basically buried as quickly as possible so that he serves no purpose and that he is forgotten quickly, to potentially fire him in a few months or weeks, or to completely recycle him. And I ask myself, why do that? What sense does it make? It's absurd. It almost seems like there is someone or several people within WWE who wanted to promote Giovanni Vinci, recognizing his potential, but once he fell into the hands of others, the question is, who is ultimately responsible for all this? Is it Triple H, who is at the head of everything creative, who, upon seeing Giovanni Vinci's vignettes, either doesn't like this identity or character and thought, okay, I'll let him debut, but I will bury him right away? This is a practice in WWE that I find so stupid. It's all about lobbying, politics, and influence to want to bury someone. Maybe he is the favorite of an internal rival of Triple H or something like that, and he is paying the price for it. While there are nice vignettes, work has been done, and he has a background, he still deserves to be highlighted, yet he is ruining everything. And I must say that it's not just the fact that losing to Apollo Crews in a few weeks outrages and frustrates me. It's not just that. It's that if you compare what you saw and what you could imagine and hope for when watching the vignettes, compared to what you ultimately saw once he arrived at SmackDown, is really a lack of effort, as is often the case, unfortunately, in WWE, at least in the modern era, a laziness. I find that his theme song at the end of summer 2024 on SmackDown is very random, has nothing Italian about it, and does not at all remind me of the universe that those vignettes had created, even though it was possible to do something Italian. One might think of a theme song with a more classical music style, or perhaps even go further and incorporate a bit of an operatic vibe. This would immediately evoke Italy. Well, it's true that it might have some connotations with Santino Marella, but it can be done in a serious way. The same goes for the graphic charter, which is also very generic. Nothing very Italian. In fact, it's as if one person took care of the vignettes and then another person took over the file when it arrived at SmackDown. And the person who took care of everything regarding the entrance thought, well, I don't like you, I don't care about you, I'm going to give you the most generic thing possible. And I must also say that even in terms of his outfit, I'm not a fan. So, indeed, it should be noted that he arrives in a sort of tracksuit that resembles the Gucci brand. So, on one hand, I could say, yes, it reminds me of Italy. It also evokes luxury and the world of vignettes, that's for sure. But if I compare, for example, because it's important to know that he was in NXT before, and that in the summer of 2022, for instance, when we saw the entrance he made in the summer of 2022, I invite you to go see it. It's really a great entrance. And then you see what they did on SmackDown in 2024, when they could have just done a copy-paste. So even though in his entrance to NXT, I think they could have gone much further with the Italian aspect. Can you believe that in NXT, you could see him, not only was he shirtless, he was oiled up. And it must be said that he has a good physique. In this entrance to NXT, he was shirtless. He was doing a gimmick that I find super. Basically, he walked a bit, then looked at the camera lens, took a pause, and on the screen, there was a sort of photo effect where there was a freeze frame, as if a photo was actually taken of that moment live. And first, there was the word Veni. Then he resumed his pose a little after Vidi, then Vinci again, and finally Giovanni Vinci. Basically, several poses, which went along with the somewhat classy side, the slightly or even model-like side. There was also a whole black and gold graphic charter at NXT, and I think to myself, it was already much better, even though I would have liked even more Italy. It lacked Italy. So, when we see all of this, we think he inherited an identity that is very random. It's as if someone had the intention to sabotage him. Really, that's the impression Giovanni Vinci's booking gives. It's being there to get buried. Why? What's the problem? But it's incomprehensible. And this is really my rant. I think it's so rare in WWE these days to have characters with identity. I'm the first to complain about it, by the way. And I tell myself, some wrestlers, I see potential in them, others less so, of course. He is one of those I see. And I think to myself, it's so rare to see this kind of wrestler where you already have a character, you already have a unique identity, while others do not, and are still in the main roster. I tell myself, and this is actually what happened very often during the Ruthless Aggression era, and we could see, even at that time, that there are often wrestlers where there may be a lack of identity at the core and where a very strong character can only serve them. That's true. So then, it all depends on where this very strong identity comes from. It can be a country. You could say your academic background. I think of Vladimir Kozlov, for example. Back in the day, you would be a Russian straight out of the Cold War universe. In this case, we could say Giovanni Vinci. Your identity is that you are Italian, so we will play that up fully. But an Italian, not like Santino Marella, but an Italian in contrast to Marella, hyper credible and worthy of a real main event. Push. Some wrestlers need a strong identity from the start. And when you take that away, or present them as they are, sometimes it can seem very generic. You don't really understand what sets them apart. And above all, you can't really place them right away. And I find that it's important in WWE wrestling to immediately associate something with a character. You think to yourself, in this case, if it had been done well, we would have said, Giovanni Vinci. Oh yes, that Italian wrestler. The classy Italian guy, of course. And there, we would have had something. And yet, they sabotaged everything. And that's my rant. That's really my rant. I tell myself, he is young. He had the physique he needed. He had the identity he needed. He had the great vignettes. He had all the arguments for a great showcase. So, does that mean it's all over? Once and for all? Is it really finished for Giovanni Vinci now? After such a failed debut, or rather, such a sabotaged one, I feel compelled to say, real question. So, we know that in WWE and in wrestling, at least, things can quickly be forgotten. One can also, even WWE itself, sometimes act as if nothing happened, as if something never existed. So when you consider that, you think we could possibly start everything over from scratch, give him a few wins, and poof, we forget about that disaster against Apollo Crews. It's possible. Moreover, we live in a time where everything is very ephemeral, where we can say that it's true that with this constant accumulation of information everywhere, throughout the entire era of social media, etc., we quickly forget things. Perhaps you put Giovanni Vinci on the shelf for a few weeks, then you bring him back and have him win. It would be almost as if nothing had happened. Why not, right? In any case, I think to myself, if you want to save him, you're going to have to do that. Otherwise, he's done for. So, I tell myself, the only chance for him not to be completely wasted, not to be yet another flop in WWE, is to forget what happened and give him a series of victories. Anyway, the formula, we know it. You've seen it. For a character to get over well and to be able to reach the main event, it's always the same. They need to build momentum. They need to be given victories. It has to be progressive and it needs to come together. Also, timing is important. The construction of this momentum should not take too long, but it also shouldn't be rushed. So, ideally, I would say it should last a few months, with perhaps an intermediate step of an Intercontinental or United States title, and then we go for it. That's what they did with his colleague Gunther, I want to say. Why didn't they do the same as Gunther? Gunther, first of all, had an Intercontinental Championship reign of over 600 days after all. That's no small feat, with a build-up of momentum like that beforehand. A credibility that is built. To then move on to the next step, which is the heavyweight title. It was just a matter of doing the same. Give him a series of victories, fight for an interim title, and then everything was set for a great success. And yet, they are completely messing everything up. And I really wonder if this is not a case of internal sabotage, if there are those who do not like Giovanni Vinci, or at least who rejects his character within WWE. Because clearly, everything gives the impression that he was really launched, just to be wasted right away. Honestly, we've never seen someone debut and lose immediately. It's truly a failure and an embarrassment. Let's hope. In any case, let's hope. I look forward to what you think in the comments. Let me know what you think. If you find that Giovanni Vinci is, as Michael Cole mentions in commentary, a better looking Adam Pearce. It's true that he said that. A little detail that we remember afterwards precisely. And tell me in the comments if you think that he has everything it takes to make it in WWE and that the Stanford Federation has messed everything up. How do you think he should be booked? Or if you find him useless, that he serves no purpose, that this whole Italian identity doesn't resonate with you, and you say frankly, it's really not a big loss, I invite you to share your opinion. By the way, I thank everyone who gives their opinion. All those who like, all those who comment, all those who participate in the life of the channel. You are the best. It is always a pleasure to read. It keeps the channel alive. It helps the channel. So I truly thank you for that. And as I already said, I will not hesitate to answer any questions or debates you may have in future videos with great pleasure. So don't hesitate. And I will conclude by saying that I hope that in due time, Giovanni Vinci, we will eventually see him, he will eventually come, and he will eventually triumph.
We can say that this topic raises a lot of questions. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay in the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?